Hi everyone, thank you for accompanying me on this new episode of Project 25. It's a new year with many new stories and I am very excited. So thank you very much for following the project along the past year. In today's episode, I spoke with Venessa Robinson. At 65 years old, Venessa Robinson doesn't hold herself back. After living a life working as an IT professional, as an Army Reserve officer, of dancing, country, and ballroom and parenting, she is now focused on enjoying life as much as she can, for as long as she can, and in helping others as a way to pay back. For many years, there were two parts of Vanessa, and she hit one, but not anymore. Please join me in this episode as I listen to Vanessa's anecdotes, experiences, and advice for the new generation of 20-somethings. But before diving into the episode, I want to say a huge thank you to the Rainbow Elders of Calgary for being so open to me and allowing me to tell their stories. The Rainbow Elders Calgary is a volunteer-run organization determined to make a significant difference in the lives of 2S LGBTQ+ seniors. The organization provides support and addresses issues such as social isolation, housing, and loneliness. The Rainbow Elders of Calgary believe that they have a responsibility to connect with and be role models for our vulnerable 2S LGBTQ+ youth. So, if you are interested in connecting with or donating to the Rainbow Elders of Calgary, you can find their website on the episode description. Thank you very much, and I hope you like this episode. Project 25 was born out of the obsession that we have of figuring things out. Being a 25-year-old or a 20-something is weird because it's fun, confusing, and exciting, all at once. It's an age where we realize that maybe the goals we had for ourselves weren't really ours to begin with. An age of tons of learning and unlearning, and an age of frequently asking ourselves, what am I doing? And that leaves us with a lot of uncertainty. I'm Andrea Juarez, and I created this project after hitting my quarter-life crisis. I decided to look for answers and ask my family members, friends, and people I admire about their experiences being 25, what has changed, what they've learned, and their advice for the new generation of 20-somethings. There is a lot to live and learn, and I am a firm believer that listening is a powerful tool. Even if all the answers are within us, by listening to others, we can feel understood, but also reflect on ourselves, learn, and think about what we want for our present and for our future. Vanessa, thank you very much again for joining me today. And I just wanted to ask you before we start, what is your age, title, or how will you describe yourself?
I'm 65. I'm a retired IT professional and trans woman.
Thank you very much. And Vanessa, I wanted to start off asking as well, what did you do when you were 25? So were you studying or were you working or what were your hobbies?
Sure. At 25, I was married and working at my first job, which was a computer programmer for the Department of National Defense in Ottawa. And I had a 2-year-old son. And I was also in the Army Reserve as an officer.
Wow, was that a tough job?
I was in the Army Reserve because it was something I really liked. And I joined actually when I was in high school, and I loved the outdoor aspects of it, and I gained a great deal of self-confidence through the military training. So it was a fun thing to do. I know it seems strange being Army seeming fun, but I did enjoy the camaraderie and the physical training and such of that. As far as trans women know, I didn't consider myself trans at the time. I was what I would call a closet cross-dresser. That is, I would dress in women's clothing when I had the opportunity. The only person who knew about it at that point was my wife at the time, and she was partly accepting of it, but not fully. And yeah, so I was just figuring this aspect of myself out at that time. It wasn't till just actually the past year where I finally realized that this is who I was, part of who I am, anyways.
Wow. Thank you for sharing that. And I am happy to hear that as well, that you found what you want to be.
Yeah.
And Vanessa, I think this topic kind of leads to my next question. So, what did you think when you were 25? You said you enjoyed the military, but I wanted to ask you as well, and that you also mentioned that you like to dress in women's clothing. But what do you think when you were 25? Like, did you have a vision of the world, or did you have a certain expectation of how life should be like?
Yeah, I had very little understanding of this, and back in those days, it was not something that was talked about and stuff. There was, there was no, well, maybe Pride Parade, you're just sort of getting started, but it was not something I had any knowledge of. I kind of even know, I thought maybe that when I got married, I wouldn't want to cross dress anymore, but it turns out I did, and because it's a part of me expressing who I am. But yeah, I didn't talk to anybody about it. I didn't know anything about it. Well, I guess I knew there were other people that did it, but I didn't know any of them. So yeah, it was a totally different world than it is today. But I mean, again, that's not everything about who I am, right? But it's a part of myself that I felt I had to keep private because it wasn't acceptable. But I mean, I enjoyed doing physical things and stuff too. But like to me, I like what I would want, like when I'm off doing army exercises and digging ditches, trenches, and patrolling through the night and getting dirty and everything else. When that was done, I wanted to get dressed up pretty, but didn't really have that option most of the time, right? So it's like there was those two parts of me, and I had to hide one part and not the other. My vision of the world, I've always been a little on the left wing side of things, and still am. So I was atheist. I stopped believing in God and the church back when I was in my teens. I was raised Roman Catholic, but it just didn't seem to work out for me. I was pretty focused at the time on raising my family and starting my career off and where that was going to go. So, I guess like any other 25-year-old, I didn't really know all that much, didn't have much life experience yet. Muddling through as best I could and enjoying life. I always, believed in helping others, and there was a movie that came out at some point. It was called Pay It Forward, and hadn't heard of that terminology, but it's something I always believed in doing. Like if I helped somebody out and they, offered me money or whatever, I would just say no, just help somebody else out.
Yeah, so the good will trickle down to the
Yeah.
others. I love that. Thank you very much. And Vanessa, this is a very broad question, so feel free to focus on whatever you want. But basically, from when you were 25 to this day, what has changed? Either in the world, in yourself, in your beliefs, in your environment. Yeah.
Well, that was 40 years ago, and an awful lot has changed in the world since that. I mean, I was starting life as a programmer, or putting instructions into the computer on punch cards. So the technology advances over the last 40 years have been amazing. GPS. I remember trying to find I had a contract in Germany, and I had flown into Frankfurt and had to try and find my way to this other city called Mannheim, trying to read a paper map while driving the car in a foreign country, whereas now you just punch it into, the GPS, and
Yeah.
it tells you how to get there.
Yeah, on Google Maps. I don't know what I would have done like 40 years ago
Yeah.
if I existed. I'm very bad at reading maps, so
Yeah. Personal computers. The idea when I started in my career that people would have computers in their home was a foreign idea, and now smartphones, internet, 24-hour news channels, and all this stuff. So yeah, a lot has happened. I've seen all kinds of ups and downs in the economy. When I started my first job, and I was 2 years in when I was 25, and the interest rates at that time were in the neighborhood of 18%. And inflation, we went through wage and price controls because inflation was just out of control. So when I hear the news now, they're talking about the inflation rate, I'm going, you guys don't know what inflation is.
The one that's coming up next year, apparently.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Now, hopefully it never gets as bad as it was
Yeah.
back in the 80s, because that was pretty bad. But we got through it all. I mean, I saw things like the fall of the Berlin Wall, the end of the Soviet Union, the beginning of the European Union, NAFTA. I've lived through many different governments, different political parties, and all that. So, yeah, I've seen quite a bit. On a personal side, been married and divorced twice. 25, I just had a son, but a year later, been in a house, I have a daughter. They're both grown up adults now. I moved several times, changed jobs, even lived in Australia for 3 years. And another big change was I became vegan 12 years ago. And had a couple other long-term relationships besides the 2 marriages I had. Learned ballroom and country dancing, gained a lot of self-confidence over the years. I like to think I learned from my mistakes because I made enough of them. Probably one of the most important things I learned was interpersonal skills, and that not everybody thinks the same. Like I kind of had this idea back then that, well, everybody must think like I do, right? And I didn't understand why with some people I didn't relate to them well. It wasn't until I took an interpersonal relationship course that I understood that, oh, some people don't think the same way I do. That was a big thing. I learned how to process and get through grief and let go of the past, because I certainly had to do that a few times. And I certainly know and understand myself a lot more than I did then.
That's amazing. Yeah, many things have changed for sure. I am interested about what you said about living in Australia. How was that experience for you?
It was amazing. It was strange. Um, when I was 46 years old, I mean, I guess I always liked, thought of the idea of Australia, but I seriously decided to look into it when I was 46. And it turns out if you're over 45, you can't work there unless you're sponsored by a company. So I kind of gave up on that idea for a while. But then I was a self-employed IT trainer for a number of years. And at one point, I came across a job opening for a trainer in Australia, and I applied for it, but never heard back. So figured, okay, didn't get it. And then, I don't know, probably about 8 months to a year later, I got a phone call saying, still interested in Australia? And I went, yeah. And, so Skype interview or two later and a bunch of paperwork and things. And yeah, I was off to Australia. A funny thing sort of happened on the way, though. So once I knew I was moving, but it was about 3 months before all the paperwork for my visa and stuff could be processed. I thought I was single at the time and thought, okay, no problem. I can, I'd just do some casual dating over the summer. And I ended up dating this woman who I probably would not have even started dating because she had a 9-year-old son at the time. I had already raised my own 2 kids and actually had been kind of a stepdad to another girlfriend that I was with for several years. And so that really wasn't where I wanted to be at that point in my life, was looking after kids again. But I knew it wasn't going to turn in anything because I was moving to another country. Turns out she fell in love with me and asked me to take her to Australia. And even though we had only been dating a couple of months, and yeah, so
And you did?
yeah,
How was that?
well, it was good and bad. The smart part of me, like if I was advising a friend who told me, yeah, I'm moving to Australia and this woman and her kid are coming with me, who I barely know, I'd say you're crazy. But, gave it a shot. We ended up getting married while we were there, but it didn't work out. But still, it was a good time and enjoyed the time, even, with her son for those 3 years. And it was only because the company I was working for went bankrupt that we ended up moving back to Canada.
Okay.
Personally, I would preferred to stay and try and find another sponsor while I was there. But my wife had 2 adult kids back here in Canada who she wanted to come back and be with. So we moved back to Canada, but we ended up getting divorced, or separated rather, a year later.
Okay.
But yeah, it's an amazing country.
Yeah, I've always
It's,
wanted to go there.
I mean, Canada's an amazing country too, but I've lived here all my life, so that was new and different. And
Exactly, yeah.
everything, the seasons were opposite, driving on the opposite side of the road, kangaroos hopping, driving along the road in the city and seeing kangaroos hopping around beside you. It was just kind of mind blowing, actually.
Yeah, that's exciting to hear. Thank you for telling me about that.
I love having fun with people who were, complaining about how cold it was when it got down to plus 10 there. You guys don't know what cold is.
Yeah.
On the other hand, when it was 40 plus, I was like, this is too
Yeah.
hot.
Yeah. And Vanessa, I wanted to ask you as well. So you mentioned in early that you are retired.
Yes.
What do you do? And what are your beliefs now? So what did you spend your time in? And like, what is your mindset now that everything has changed?
Yeah, I don't understand how I managed to live my life working full time. It's like you think, okay, I got all this time, but time still just goes by real fast. It seems like, mind you, I only retired back at the end of May, so it's only been a few months. And I moved to a new place in June, so that took up a bunch of my time. Other than that, I play sports, traveling, hiking, spending time in the mountains, and just being free to go down internet rabbit holes and things, right? And there's other things I'll get to. I guess one of the other things I've started doing, so this summer I went on a month-long trip through the US. Totally spur of the moment thing. Somebody who's in a Facebook group that I'm in said she was in Oregon hiking for a couple of weeks. If anybody wanted to join her, and I went, okay, I got time. So drove down there, and the two of us spent a couple of weeks at the end of July hiking in Oregon, but then we decided to continue on and traveled into California, Nevada. We traveled to get to Vegas, and at that point we split, went our own ways. She had to head back to California and fly back to the UK where she was from, and I continued on north through Utah and Salt Lake City and all that. But one of the things we did, which I'd never done before, is a thing called couch surfing, which is where you stay at other people's places. And that is cheap, a lot cheaper than staying in hotels. And it also is a way of meeting people. And so now, since I've been back, I've been hosting people at my place. So I've had a couple from Germany, another couple from Austria, and I've got actually, starting in a couple of days, I'm going to be hosting a refugee couple from the Ukraine.
That's amazing. Like you mentioned earlier, like paying it forward,
Yeah.
right? Thanks for sharing that. And that sounds like an amazing summer. And like you said, if you have the time, why not do it? And Vanessa, I want to ask you now. So, what has been your biggest challenge and how do you deal with it or dealt with it?
Certainly, one of my challenges throughout my life is dealing with my gender identity and figuring that out. And I'll come back to that in a second. But some of the other challenges, of course, was raising kids on a limited income for actually. So my son was actually born 3 months premature, and we didn't even know he was whether he'd live or not for the first few days. And fortunately, he did. But I was still in university at the time, and my wife got laid off when she was pregnant. So that was a bit of a struggle at first financially. Fortunately, I had saved up enough money from my part-time jobs in the Army Reserve to make a go of it till I got a full-time job. But most of the time when the kids were growing up, my wife only worked part-time. So we were, I just make do on a limited income. But so it was a challenge. Just marital problems and the divorces certainly were challenges I had to deal with. I didn't always deal with things the best possible, but I think I did the best I knew how at the time. So, one of the mistakes I think I made was that I thought I could solve everything myself. I thought I could figure this out and didn't get help when I should have. My first wife and I eventually did get some marriage counseling, but it was too late for it to save the marriage. So I really wish we'd gotten counseling sooner. It might have made a difference. One of the things that really did help me, I was really stuck after my first marriage ended in that I still loved her. and I didn't know how to move on. And I was actually quite fortunate that I was at dance one time, and a woman at the dance told me about this program that was called Rebuilding, that was run by a couple here in Calgary. And I was pretty skeptical, but I knew I needed something, so I signed up for the program, and it really was an amazing program that helped me find a way to put my love for my ex in a special place in my heart and move on. Yeah, so that was great. And actually, what was really kind of cool is two other parts. The first part of the program was about letting go, and it helped take you through the phases of grief, and we did all kinds of exercises. And I think what was wonderful about that program was it, unlike just normal counseling where you're talking to a counselor, this was spending time with other people going through the same thing, and that kind of shared experience, and being able to let out your feelings in a safe place
Yeah.
really helped. And then they had another program that was about looking into the things in your past that's holding you back from your childhood and such. And that again also really helped me to learn how I was holding myself back from messages I had picked up that weren't true. And then finally, there was a third part about how to build healthy new relationships, and that was also really wonderful. And then I volunteered back with that program for several years, helping other people too.
That's amazing. I love to. This reminds me what you were mentioning about being together, experiencing the same things, and just and in a safe space. What a woman that I've interviewed, Ana Maria, she was telling me how important community love is in order to heal and help each other and uplift each other.
Yeah, one of the things I really learned in that is how important is listening. Because what I found, mostly people want to help you, right? And so they're very quick with the advice, and they tell you, oh, you'll get over it, or she wasn't good for you, or whatever. But nobody seemed to just be interested in listening to what I was going through, whereas the people in that program were.
That's beautiful.
I've learned from that to do the same thing out in the world, that to listen and hear what somebody has to say without judgment, criticism, or advice. Just to let them share what they need to share.
Exactly. Yeah, which is also the point of this broadcast as well.
Yeah.
So thank you for your honesty and your vulnerability and just for being here, sharing your story.
So again, even with my cross-dressing and ultimately acceptance of my being cross-gendered, one of the things that helped was after moving to Calgary, found out a group for cross-dress, a social group for cross-dressers here in town, which allowed me to interact with other people dealing with similar issues in their marriages and stuff with cross-dressing, and make just some new friends and have somebody I could talk. Like, I didn't feel safe talking to any of my other friends about this, and so that really helped, finding that community. And ultimately, it was somebody in that group that told me about a wonderful thing here in Calgary called Skipping Stone, which is an organization that helps trans people. And yeah, that helped me with this beginning of final stage. It's still an ongoing process, really. But yeah, it's interesting how so many things that I've come across, whether it be that rebuilding program, the skipping stones and stuff, it's through talking to people that there's all these things out there that you may never find out about, and just coincidental conversations you might have with somebody that they mentioned something that you didn't know about and that you can look into. That's why we need, one of the many reasons why we need community.
Yeah, just like share like this. These are the resources that are out there. Yeah, I'm like that too, in the sense that, okay, if I find a free program like education or something like that, I share it with my friends and my whole group, like, hey, just so you know, if you're interested, like, check this out. So it can spread and help more people, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Thank you, Vanessa. And I don't know if there's anything else you would like to add, or do you want to go to the next question?
When I was younger, I tried to solve all my challenges myself, and that, I think, was one of my mistakes. I didn't reach out for help when I should have, and I was pretty convinced I had the answers. I guess arrogant in a sense, that it wasn't until I got counseling and stuff that I kind of, like, I remember going into counseling and thinking, okay, that now, Problems, it's her. It's not me, of course. I'm
Yeah.
fine,
It's easier to
you
blame the
know.
other,
So we'll
hey?
go to counseling and fix her. What I found out is that no, I needed to fix myself. Not that I was broken per se, right? But there's things we can always improve about ourselves and learn. And yeah, I guess that's one of the things I learned over time was I don't have all the answers and reach out, get help, even if you don't think you need it.
Yeah, that's a big one for sure. Even I've gotten counseling too.
Yeah.
And I remember because other friends had gotten counseling, and I was like, well, I was really struggling, but I was like, well, I don't think I need it, but okay, I'll go ahead and like try it. Oh my gosh. I needed so much counseling. It was like, and now, and the way I saw it now, it was like, we all need it. It doesn't matter
Yeah,
if you think you
absolutely.
don't, we all need it. And it's not easy, but it's gonna like help us long term for sure.
Yeah.
And Vanessa, thank you for sharing that. I wanted to ask you now, you were talking about some of your mistakes,
Yeah.
but I wanted to ask if you could share about a time in which you succeeded and what happened and what did you do?
Well, I'll just tie back to one of the things I already said. So, one of the things, the success I had was when I did that rebuilding program. I succeeded in overcoming a huge obstacle in my emotional life by taking a chance and overcoming my skepticism and actually giving that program a try. And I remember when the first night of the program, I was really skeptical. So I'm a very analytical person. I worked in IT for 40 years, right? So I'm a very analytical kind of person. And I'm used to going to things and there's an agenda and it's all laid out and all this, and there's a timetable and everything. And this didn't have that. And I'm going, well, what the hell's going on here, right? And it was kind of touchy feely stuff. And that wasn't my comfort zone at the time. But okay, I'll give it a shot and we'll see what happens. And I'm really glad I did. So yeah, I think sometimes you succeed by taking a chance and trying something that's outside your comfort zone.
Thanks for saying that. That's a really good phrase for sure. And Vanessa, now I'm going to ask the opposite.
Yeah.
So, can you share a time in which you failed? So, what happened? How did you handle the situation? And what did you learn?
Yeah, one of the things that actually came to mind for that was there was a point in which I kind of failed. I failed both as a parent and as a husband in focusing on what wasn't working instead of what was. And an example that I look back at is my son was in high school was struggling, not because he was a very smart kid, was capable of getting really good marks. But I think some of the stuff that was going on in our family life at home was affecting him, and he was skipping school and stuff. And I remember at one point he brought home a report card for a semester, and he had 3 good marks and one just barely passing mark. And I focused on the bad mark. My intention was good and that I wanted to go, okay, obviously you don't need help with those other subjects. What's wrong? What's going wrong here? How can we fix it? And I realized now looking back that the mistake I made there was I focused on the bad mark and not on the good marks. And I think he was looking for attention and he got attention for the bad stuff instead of the good stuff. And I have no doubt now that if I had focused and praised him for those good marks and maybe just asked if he needed any help in that other subject, but not really focus on it, I think that would have really encouraged him to do much better in school by praise and encouragement rather than criticism. And I realize now as well, I did that in my relationship, my first wife as well, that I focused on the things I didn't like about, that she did or whatever, and would criticize her for those things instead of showing appreciation and complimenting her on the things that I did like. And I didn't understand at the time. And this was part of that whole everybody doesn't think like I do thing. Like to me, when I received criticism, that motivated me to try harder. But that doesn't work with a lot of people. I don't know why, but I'm one of these people that take criticism as a challenge. And so if
Yeah.
somebody would criticize something, I mean, I would I didn't necessarily receive it well. I mean, I would be pissed off or whatever they criticized me,
Yeah.
but
We all
it would
usually are.
motivate me to say, well, I'm going to prove you wrong.
Yeah.
But I don't think most people are like that. And instead, if somebody, does something, like one of the things that my wife might, like, I liked her to dress up nice for me, right? And so it might be come home from work, she'd be dressed up nice for me, but she wasn't wearing high heels. So instead of being happy that she made that effort, I would criticize, well, why didn't you wear high heels? And of course,
Okay.
her reaction to that, which I we talked like far too late in we learned a lot about each other in the relationship after we split up, and actually talked to each other sometimes, and we'd go, oh, I didn't know that. But it was, to her, she was saying, well, why should I bother? No matter what I do, you're going to find something to criticize.
Yeah.
So
That makes sense.
what's the point? Whereas I thought it was saying, well, if I don't tell her that, how's she going to get better?
Yeah. So it was a miscommunication
Yeah,
problem.
just a different,
Oh,
if I've learned that, the people have different personalities, and if you want to get along, you've got to understand them, learn what motivates them, and come to where they are, rather than thinking that the same old thing's always going to work. So I learned to focus on the positive and the good things and encourage those, and then you're going to get a lot more of the good.
yeah. Thank you, Vanessa, for sharing that. That was very interesting. Especially, I think sometimes we live so much in our own heads. I wouldn't say that I focus on the negative, but I do sometimes. And it's funny because this is the beauty of this podcast as well, that I hear a lot of people with different experiences and different ways to see the world. So it's like, for example, I am obsessed with goals or whatever. And there's people who don't care about goals, or they just take life as it comes. And I think that in the past I would have been like, oh my gosh. And now it's like, I think it's refreshing. It's like, that is so refreshing. Like, it's just hearing all these different perspectives. So thank you for sharing that. And talking about goals, I want to ask you now, what are your goals or plans for the future?
I'm figuring that out, actually. Entering two big new parts of my life: retirement and living and figuring out my new gender identity. And in that, I'm not sure what my goals are as far as that goes right now, other than to start in a direction and see where it takes me. I'm starting next week. Like, the first step for me was to just get used to dressing in public. And now I'm very comfortable with this. So that's step one. And then I had a hard time figuring out, is what am I on the where am I on the gender spectrum, and how do I figure this out. And I did get some counseling, which is the smart thing, and that has helped. And it's an evolving process. And I think the whole gender thing is a spectrum, and there's people I know that it's very clear to them where they are, and they're trans, they're in the wrong body for who they are. And so they have very clear goals of wanting to change their body to match who they are. And in fact, my oldest brother became my sister 20 years ago. That for her, that was the case. She knew that she was a woman, even though she was born as a boy, and tried really hard to be a male. But finally, in her 40s, she realized that wasn't who she was. For me, it's never been that clear cut. And that's where it's more challenging for me to figure out where to go with this. I have both male and female aspects to me, and it's not a case for me of knowing I am a woman, but rather wishing I was. If I had a choice in life, I would choose to have been born female. Although, to be honest, having learned about a lot of the problems women have had to put up with in their life
Yeah.
and careers and stuff, I perhaps have more empathy for them because of that. But yeah, at the level of just from a personal being comfortable who I am, I would prefer to have been a woman, but I can certainly understand that I had many advantages in life, in my career and everything, having been. But yeah, so I'm still figuring it out, and I don't know if I'll ever have surgery, but I am going to start on hormone therapy once I get the doctor's appointment next week, and we'll see where that takes me on the next step. So to me, it's kind of like, okay, I'll take a step in a direction and we'll see how far I want to go along that route. Retirement wise, one of the things I have to do is figure out where I want to live. I came very close to moving to Costa Rica when I retired because I was in a long distance relationship with a woman who lives in Costa Rica. And the plan actually was I would retire and move to Costa Rica to be with her. But COVID kept us apart for a long time. And once we actually got to spend time together, we realized we weren't quite the right two people for each other. So then I was going to keep working, but I thought, okay, with the two of us living together in Costa Rica, and fine, I can afford it, but I didn't think I could afford to retire this soon on my own. But I had already put in to retire at work, and I'll make this work. But the idea of moving to another country is in my mind, so I have to figure out what God's going to do and how that will work with this gender journey I'm on as well, and trying to match all those things together. So it's really uncertain right now, to be honest, but I want to enjoy my life.
Might as well.
Yeah. And so that's kind of like, I don't have a goal to say, okay, I'm going to be here in 5 years or whatever. It's when I'm going to enjoy my life as best I can. I hope to find a partner to share my life with, although I know that's going to be a challenge. And if I don't, that's fine. I'm going to enjoy my life as much as I can for as long as I can.
Yeah, you have yourself.
Yeah, I have myself, and I have things I enjoy doing. Yeah, I've got friends, and I'm going to make the best of it.
Thank you. I love to hear that. You're making the best out of your retirement journey.
Yeah.
And Vanessa, I forgot to ask you this question because I don't think I did. So, what has motivated you, or what motivates you now? You were just saying enjoying life, but I don't know if there are any other motivators
Yeah,
out
this sort
there.
of like I mentioned earlier on that criticism strangely has motivated me. Sometimes in the wrong direction, but I like to say I like challenges. So I like to challenge myself. Growing up as a kid, I was a skinny little runt. I was one of the last ones to be picked for sports in school and stuff. I was picked on a lot. And as I got older though, and I had very low self-confidence, and so now I've come to the point where I enjoy challenging myself and wanting to be better, but not obsessively either. Way better athlete I am now than when I was a kid. And I do like to try and be as good as I can be at whatever sport I'm playing, but also having fun at doing it.
Yeah.
There's
So
no
without
point doing it if I'm not enjoying it.
so without the pressure. Hey.
Yeah, and so like I don't want to be on a team that's all about winning. I mean, it's fun to win, but if the last thing I would want to be is on a team, whereas if I make a mistake, people are going to yell at me and say, "You idiot," and not for me. I would rather be on a losing team where people are having fun, but at the same time have the opportunity to improve my skills and stuff. So that's what I like doing. I love personal obstacles. I love to challenge myself physically. So like every year I do at least one obstacle race. Like I like running, but I like, rather than just straight running, which I do on an ongoing basis anyway, I like to do these obstacle races like the Spartan race or Mud Girl or whatever, where you're crawling through the mud and
Yeah,
climbing
I've done that
obstacles
one.
and stuff. I guess it brings back memories of my army days.
Yeah.
But they're fun and challenging, and so meeting challenges is one of the things that motivates me. I'm motivated to help people. I feel good when I do something good for somebody else. I want to make this world a better place for everybody, and so that's one of the things that motivates me, is to help and just try and make things better for people and for animals as well. I mentioned I'm vegan, and so it's important to me as well. Like, I don't try and force anybody into it, but to me, not harming animals is an important thing, and choices in life based on that. And I learned it's not that hard.
Thank you.
Yeah.
And now that you are just mentioning that you want to help others, I wanted to ask you, what advice do you have for today's 20 somethings? Or what do you wish you knew when you were 25?
Well, one thing I used to, when I came home from work, was about the time that Oprah was on, And she had this guy named Dr. Phil who was on a regular basis, and then he ended up with his own show. I don't watch it anymore, and I think he's gone a bit crazy. But there was one thing that he would often say to his guests that I wish somebody had said to me when I was 25, and that is, how's that working for you? I had mentioned that, so I was convinced I knew, what was right, and it was, the other people. And that statement, and obviously he would say it to people. If you were on his show, it wasn't because things were working well for you. They were there to try, and he was going
Yeah.
to help solve your problem, basically television counseling, right? But I realized when I heard him say that to people, going, how's that working for you? And go, yeah, that's not working for me. Maybe I have to try something different. And even though I knew I was right, it wasn't working. So yeah, that's a good piece of advice to anybody. I think, how's that working for you? If it's not working, you need to try something different.
Yeah. In whatever aspect,
Yeah,
right?
whatever it is. If it isn't working, try something different, or get help or whatever in it. Get counseling, get coaching, whatever it takes, and have confidence in yourself. By the time I was 25, I had a certain amount, but I still had a lot of self doubts and stuff. And yeah, so have confidence in yourself. As I mentioned earlier, get help even if you don't think you need it. I think we've changing, but certainly when I was 25, there was a lot of stigma about getting any kind of mental health
Oh,
uh,
yeah.
help and stuff.
Yeah. I think it's changing a little bit
Yeah.
now, but even like my parents are like, no, I'm not doing that. And I'm like, okay. Like my brother and I will suggest to them, like, you should get therapy or something. They're like, mm.
Well, it's almost like, I think, just like we get, regular medical checkups, even when there's not necessarily anything that is wrong with you.
Exactly. Yeah.
Um, Regular mental health checkups should be a thing. One other thing is, love is not enough. You need relationship skills. I hear so many young people, and I probably believed this myself when I was young. As long as you love each other, it'll all work out. We're going, no, I'm sorry, that isn't enough. You can love each other to pieces, but if you don't know how to make a relationship work, it's not enough. It certainly helps, but yeah, love's not enough. Learn how to communicate. And it's better to be alone than in a bad relationship. There's so many people that will stay in a bad relationship because they're afraid of being alone, or get into bad relationships because they
Yeah.
don't want to be alone. And by alone, I don't mean completely alone. I mean not in
A
a
relationship.
one-to-one relationship. Absolutely, you don't want to be alone. You want to have friends and stuff, but you don't need to be in a relationship to be happy. So yeah, those would be my advice for 25 now.
Thank you so much, Vanessa. And I have one last question for you before I let you go. Is there anything you'd like to share that you think it's important and I didn't ask?
Yeah, and I guess this comes a lot from my trans journey, and that is that I think we need to support and encourage our kids into being their true self. I think a lot of times parents and society have preconceived notions of what kids should do, what careers they should pursue, and these kind of things. And I think it's really important that we listen to our kids, and that we, not just our own kids, right? Whether, if you're a teacher or whatever area you happen to be in life, or you're interacting with young people, is to support and encourage them in figuring out who they are, and living their best self. I remember this summer when I was down in Portland, and I walked and was in a bookstore, and I was walking through the kids section, and that whole section there of books, LGBTQ books for kids, and it just hit me so hard emotionally, because I didn't have that growing up. I didn't know any of this. I say I knew, but I that was wrong to know. I just felt like I had to keep this secret because it wasn't normal. And when I see things like that, where it shows kids who don't fit the norm, that they're still okay, that is so important.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you for sharing that, Vanessa.
And so I participated in the Pride Parade for the first time this summer, and it was a blast. And it was so good to see so many people out, and so many kids and stuff. Yeah, the world's changing in that way for the better, as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah, feeling that support, right? Even that's why I came across the Rainbow Elders, because I saw you all at the Pride Parade, and it was like, oh my gosh, like it's I don't know, I was like, I love to hear their stories, especially because, as you were mentioning, it was hard. Right now, we are very lucky, especially kids today, right, with all the information that's out and the support. But it must not have been easy back in the day.
No, it definitely wasn't. Whether it's trans, gay, whatever, non-binary. I mean, it's tough to be a kid no matter what, right? And if you got those extra issues going on, and things like the Rainbow Elder, when you talk to people like that, so many of us hid who we were for a huge part of our life, and it's really a shame that anybody should have to feel that they need to hide any part of who they are just
Yes.
to try and fit into somebody else's idea of who they should be.
Yes.
Be yourself and get support in being it.
Thank you so much, Vanessa, for being honest and being open about those experiences. That's why I also wanted to invite you and the Rainbow Elders, because even though the world is more open now, it is still hard. Like I have friends who belong to the community and whose parents were not accepting. And I think that it's important to hear these stories and let them know that they are not alone and that it's okay to be who they are. So thank you very much for being here. I appreciate it a lot.
I've actually been very fortunate in my coming out. I've had nothing but support and encouragement. But I know for many people it's not that way. They've lost family, friends, and jobs and things. So to do anything I can to help encourage people to be more open-minded.
Thank you again, Vanessa, for your time, taking the energy to sit down and just hear me ask all these questions and telling your story.
My pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you very much for listening. If you like the episode or you think it'd be helpful for someone you know, I encourage you to share it. This way, you're also supporting the growth of this podcast. If you're someone or know someone who would like to share their experiences being 25, you can reach me at andrea.project25@gmail.com. You can also follow Project 25 on Instagram as project.xxv. So that's 25 just in Roman numbers. Thank you again for being here. I hope that you have an amazing rest of your day. Bye-bye.